What is up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Limited Resources. This episode number 484. My name is Marshall. I'm one of your Limited Resources, and joining me on the line, not from Denver, Colorado, but instead from sunny Las Vegas, Nevada. It's our special guest this week, the Hall of Famer, the MPL member, the super streamer, the world champion, William Huey Jensen. Huey, welcome to the show, buddy.
Hey, Marshall. Finally. Thanks for finally having me. I had to beg for years.
Oh, please, dude. I would have had you on anytime you wanted, and you know it. You're a busy guy, man. It's hard to track you down, but I'm super stoked that we finally got you on the show, and we get to pick your brain for this thing. But first things first, how's it going, man? How are you?
I'm doing well. I've been busy, man. Lots going on in the world of Magic these days.
Yeah, you've been streaming a lot. You've been doing MPL stuff, and of course, one of the reasons why Luis couldn't make it, he had quite a week this week. But part of that was because he was testing for the Mythic Invitational that's happening next week, and I'm sure you've been doing the same.
Oh yeah, I spent a lot of time at the end of the week. Not even the end of the week. Once deck lists were due, I went and laid on the couch, and I was like, all right, time to relax, bud.
You let it settle in a little bit that the work was behind you. I mean, you still have to obviously play the tournament, but
definitely still probably got to practice a bit with my decks and play the tournament. But I'm looking forward to the tournament. There's a lot of cool people I'm going to meet for the first time that I've had a chance to catch some of their streams and watch some of their stuff. Seem like good people, so I'm looking forward to it.
I guess I should mention that on here too. So the Mythic Invitational is next week from PAX East. And as of yesterday, from when we recorded this, I can finally say that I'm going to be doing coverage at it. They kind of had that under wraps for a long time, but it's going to be me and David Williams in the booth, as well as a host of other content creators and that kind of stuff that make up the coverage team. So that should be really fun. And I'm definitely excited. I mean, it's the biggest Magic tournament ever, straight up. It's just that's it. It is the highest value, biggest, most important, probably Magic tournament that we've had. So anyway, that should be really sweet. And I'm super stoked you're going to be there as well, Huey. And I'll see you in a few days. So on the show this week, we're going to ask Huey a bunch of questions. We've got a ton of listener questions, and I've got some questions as well that I wanted to go over. But first, got to mention our sponsor, channelfireball.com, the place to go for all things Magic related on the internet. If you want it, you're going to find it over at Channel Fireball, including, and I mentioned this before, but the great free content right on the front page of the site, some of the best players and writers and content creators on the planet making stuff awesome for you. I see that there's a new video from Matt Nass, the Combo King playing a standard Scape Shift deck. I don't even know what's in that, but something sweet there from Matt Nass. And of course, you can keep up with all your favorite pros and stuff on Channel Fireball. While you're there, well, it's easy to pick up the singles, supplies, and sealed product that you need to make your Magic world turn round and round. You're going to get great prices, and they're going to stand by their product, get it shipped out to you nice and quick over at Channel Fireball. Also, the show's brought to you by you via the patreon.com/limited resources. This is where, well, for example, when we have somebody like Huey on the show, you get to ask some questions. This is a direct line to the guests and to Luis and I when it comes to input on the show and that kind of stuff. Patreon.com/limited resources. I have a playmat and the Cracker Pack, but the site actually wasn't up for the patrons. So I'm going to have to pick the winner of that afterwards. But for now, I do have one of both. And that brings us now to our Cracker Pack. So Huey, what I did is I got one of those special boxes. You know, the ones that have the 8 packs in them with the special planeswalker in it, like the full art. I got one of those, and I have been sending some lucky patrons the what's it called? The planeswalker from each of those. Yeah. So we've actually only got 2 left, and they have one of the best planeswalkers in there is Dak Faden, and we have not opened up Dak Faden yet. I don't know what the other planeswalker that's left is.
Are you guaranteed one of each?
Yeah, you're guaranteed one of each. Yeah. All right. So first card out is Rubble Belt Recluse. Where are you at on old Rubby? 6/5.
6/5. I think that's a decent card. I would hope to not first pick it.
Yeah, agreed. Arrestor's Zeal. Never really found a home in the.
I don't really play that card. Yeah.
Yeah. Where are you at on Slimebind? I'm a big Slimebind fan.
Slimebind is really good in my favorite deck.
Which is?
Blue, white, no win conditions.
Oh, we're going to be talking about that. Don't you worry about that, buddy. Steeple Creeper?
solid filler.
Yeah, solid filler, but not where we want to be. Undercity's Embrace. Never really found a home for this one.
Yeah, that card was a card like you first, at least for me, I opened my first pack and I was like, oh, this is kind of a cool card, but in practice it was just kind of bad.
Yeah, agreed. Here's a card for Huey. Sphinx's Insight.
Yep, another good card in my favorite deck.
Yeah, there you go. Burn Bright, no. Senate Courier?
No. It's okay.
Filler, right? What about Azorius Night Arbiter?
The 2/5?
Yeah.
That's a pretty good card. The way I typically draft Azorius is it's really good in a high alert deck. So is the Senate Courier for that matter. Mm-hmm. So if you end up with an Azorius high alert deck, it can be good. I think the Night Arbiter is also good in like an Azorius Flyers deck. Even though it doesn't fly, it holds the ground and it accomplishes getting through evasion damage, which is really what you mean by Flyers. But it's not a card I pick early, and it's not even a card I always play.
Yeah. Still on that insight. All right, here comes our uncommons. What about Hackrobat? That's the 1 black-red 2/3 with Spectacle for black-red. You can play a black to give it Death Touch until end of turn, or a red to give it +2/-2.
I think Hackrobat's a great card. I think it's better than most commons.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, really solid card. Now, would you take it over Slimebind / Sphinx's Insight at this point?
First pick, first pack. If it was like a Pro Tour, yeah. If it was a draft on my stream.
Pro Tour.
If it was a draft on my stream, I wouldn't.
Sentinel's Mark is the 1 and a white flash enchantment.
It's just like below average filler, I'd say.
Right. Drill Bit?
So yeah, Drill Bit is like cards like that are a bomb sideboard card. So sometimes when you have cards like that you're reasonably, I don't want to say happy, but you're okay to play in your main deck, sometimes happy, but in certain matchups, like you don't want to leave home without it. Mm-hmm. I think it greatly increases the value of the card, though it's not a card I still want to first
pick.
It
increases its value, but not high enough to take. Now, we got an Orzhov Guildgate for our gate, and this is actually really interesting, Huey. We've actually got, so there's 2 cards left. One of them is our special Planeswalker, and the other one is another Planeswalker. How do you like that? So we obviously can't take the special Planeswalker this, in a draft.
Which one is it?
It is a Johnny Mentor of Heroes. Which
all right.
I actually forgot what this one did. This is the you gain 100 life ultimate one, though. So that's pretty sweet. But we got Dovin Grand Arbiter as our mythic here.
Yeah.
You in for Dovin?
Some people poo-poo on Dovin, but out of this pack, I'm definitely taking him.
Me too.
I think it's good enough. And Planeswalkers they create these weird sub-games in Limited where people expend a lot of resources to try to deal with them. And usually when you're the one with the Planeswalker, you're able to leverage things in a way where you win that sub-game. Even if they end up killing your Planeswalker, it might cost them 2 creatures and you might end up with 2 Thopters. You know what I mean?
And I've actually had that happen a lot when I've had Dovin, which is... Boy, we're going to talk a little bit about War of the Spark. One of our questions from one of our listeners is about it, but I look at Dovin Grand Arbiter as a really good example of a Planeswalker that is much more well-balanced for Limited than we typically think of. I agree totally with what you said, that there's this sub-game that forms, which can actually be kind of interesting, although it does tend to be kind of a non-optional sub-game for the opponent. But still, I have lost games after I've resolved Dovin. Absolutely.
Of course.
And that's, I think, where you kind of want to be with these things.
Yeah, it's not, especially for a 3-mana Planeswalker. The 3-mana Planeswalker can't be so good that basically every time you cast it, you win. Right. Or the card's just not fun.
Right. Yeah. So I would take Dovin Grand Arbiter here as well. And like I said, I'll figure out who's going to get that at Johnny Mentor of Heroes once the site is usable again. Okay, Huey, let's get into some questions here. I've got a few that I came up with for you, and then we're going to get to our listener questions as well. So First things first, I want to talk big picture for Limited here, because it's not every day that we have a guest on that has the range of Limited experience that you do. You go back all the way to near the beginnings of competitive Limited, right? I mean, when you were playing on the Pro Tour and stuff, this was pretty early on, at least, looking back now for Limited, right?
Yep. At least relatively early on.
Yeah.
Sure.
So if you go back through the history of like Limited strategy, right? The things that you saw, things were different back in the day, right? Like I wasn't playing then, but from what I can tell now, there was a much bigger emphasis on team Limited and on like Rochester draft, I guess, specifically.
Yep.
And then also the thing that, and again, I want you to kind of give us your thoughts on this, is that it feels like the players were working with far less information than they are now in general. Are those things true?
Well, I don't know if people realize this, but in 1999, when you had a limited, first of all, let me preface this by saying everybody's used to the Mythic Championships the way they are now, right? You play 2 drafts and you play 10 rounds of constructed with a constructed top 8. The Pro Tour, when I first came up, before it was the Mythic Championship, we didn't have double formats. We had limited Pro Tours. So we would go and we were just going to play draft for the entire weekend. It was going to be 2 drafts day 1, 2 drafts day 2, and a draft top 8. The first draft on each day, you played 4 rounds with your draft.
Oh, really? Wait, was it still an 8-player pod?
It was. What? So like you'd be 3-0 and you'd play a 2-1. It was a little weird in that sense, but you'd play 14 rounds of booster draft, and then if you're fortunate enough to make top 8, you'd play 3 rounds of booster draft or Rochester draft or whatever the tournament was. In 1999, if you wanted to practice draft during the week, especially if you were going to school or work, you couldn't just log on at lunch to some sort of program on the internet and do a draft. That's not how the world worked.
Right.
Like you had to find 7 other people who were willing to do a booster draft, and you had to go to a store and you had to buy packs and get lands and you had to do a draft. You know what I mean?
Man.
So, yeah. So, the time of people doing 100 drafts of the Pro Tour when the set's only been out for 2 weeks, that just didn't happen. I mean, granted, a lot of times the set had been out much longer than that. The Pro Tours weren't at all scheduled to coincide with set releases. At least that's my recollection. So occasionally you'd get a format that had been out for several months and you've done a lot of drafts, but it wasn't as simple as like, all right, I'm done with my responsibilities for the day. I'm going to just go do 3 drafts before bed. You were lucky to do 3 drafts a week.
That's insane.
So there was a lot more of it had to rely on discussion and theory and squeezing in the drafts when you could.
Okay. And so I'm curious, did this act to level the playing field in the sense that there was a lot of people who didn't really have that much experience, or were there groups of people who were able to leverage this in their favor by actually getting those 7 other people together to draft more frequently than, say, somebody who, lived in a small town or lived far away or something like that?
I think it's the latter, in a way. Like, I basically think what you're asking is, if I'm going to do anything, this is me personally, and I want to try my best to win, right? Well, whether it's Magic or something else, I can put in all the time I want with Magic specifically now. Like I can just play 20 hours of Magic a day on the internet. Yeah. I can play whatever formats I want. And I might not always play against the best competition, which isn't ideal, but at least I can play, right? At that time, I took Magic really seriously, and all I wanted to do was play Magic. And I was lucky that I was from a region that had great players and who played with the regularity where, within reason, like I was in high school and I had to go to school, but within reason, I mean, I spent a lot of time at card shops, like literally I would go from school to the card shop, do my homework at the shop, and I would get to draft a lot. Beyond that, I was able to have conversations with other good players about our opinions on draft and stuff. If I had lived somewhere where I didn't have a local shop, or the local shop simply didn't have people who wanted to play that much, like that would have just not been possible for me. And I assume there were plenty of people like that in the world. Like at the beginning of Magic, there were a lot of successful groups of people, right? Like there were the New Yorkers, the Californians, the Bostonians, the Floridians, like these major metropolitan areas where people were able to converge and play together. The DC area, but it wasn't super common to see, a couple of brothers pop up from Fargo, right? Or, a kid from Iowa or whatever. Right. It just, because how could they? Like, yes, somebody would win the PTQ, but those people would show up at the Pro Tour, and it was clear that they just didn't have the level of practice and preparation that some of us had, because they just couldn't.
That's really interesting. And then, so would you see then a big disparity in the quality of your opponents? Like, would you play against, because I assume that your average Pro Tour Mythic Championship competitor these days, when you sit down, if you don't recognize them, you probably think, well, if I don't know who you are, you're probably not some top pro that I've just never heard of, but you're also probably some Magic Online arena grinder or something, and you can probably play, right? Like you're going to give them credit.
Yeah, I pretty much assume everybody knows how to play if they're in a Mythic Championship at this point, because everybody's able to put in so many hours.
But before that,
people
wasn't
try
the case,
really hard.
right? Like, would you sit against people that were just kind of bad or awful? Laughable? I mean, was it like, did it get really weird? Like where you're like, this is the highest level I can play this game, and this person just doesn't know what they're doing?
Well, I probably did think like that, but I was also a kid.
Yeah, I'm not trying to bash the person. I'm just saying, like, whatever word you want to use.
Right. But it would be like, not whatever. Again, I'm really not trying to be disrespectful, but you would kind of just have matches that were almost like buys.
That's crazy to me.
The game was also so much more sophisticated and complex. Like, even limited, the games would go so long. There was much more... From my perspective, there was a fair bit more strategy in the games.
Interesting. Back then, you're talking about it was more sophisticated and complex back then.
Yeah, well, when I say sophisticated and complex, what I really mean is like less reliant on opening hands and more reliant on overall game strategy as opposed to tactics. I'm not making some sort of proclamation that the game was harder or easier. It was just a different focus. Also, like, you play Magic now. Somebody plays a turn 4 5/5, you don't answer it. Like you've played this format in limited. Occasionally on the play, somebody plays an incubation druid and a sunder shaman, and you lose.
Yep.
Right. Like you just can't do anything. Like those games were few and far between back in the day. And so things like that, like that's one easy way to lose at this point in time to somebody who is at their first Mythic Championship, right?
Yeah.
Like, and back then it was more like you'd play games of limited where it's like, okay, maybe you play a close game 1, but after the first game, I might know my opponent's deck has a Mahamoti Jin in it, right? And so I'll then know like, okay, well, I have this one Dark Banishing in my deck. I just can't cast it.
But you could actually craft a game plan where you could hold on to that. Right.
And nowadays you're just like, people are curving 5/5 into 8/8 into 12/12. You can't not Dark Banishing the 12/12 and wait for the 17/17.
Right,
you know what I mean?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you think, because the other part of this question I have for you is about how the sets are designed, right? They're much different than now, even in my experience as a limited player, and it's been a good, 10 years now or something I've been playing. I've got a pretty good sample size, but I know that it's changed a lot, even in my time frame. Specifically the two things that stand out to me about sort of the fundamental design are, one, the removal, right? It's gotten a lot worse. And by worse, I mean, slower, less efficient, especially at common. And then the other thing that stands out to me is the number of playables. They have really flattened out the way the cards work now, where even going back to when I started, and my goodness, anytime I've touched any of the draft formats of the kind of prior era, going back to like the early 2000s, I've done a few random drafts or crack-a-packs and stuff with that. And I mean, there's cards in there that, some of them are very good and some of them are playable, and some of them range from actively bad, like you just actually don't want to ever cast it, it makes your game worse for you, or just completely off the rails unplayable, right? Like just something that has nothing to do with anything that the limited format has going for it, and instead is focusing on some weird constructed thing or some idea that a designer had or whatever. And you rarely see those now, especially at common. If you group a modern set by commons and you go through them, there's usually very few that are actually unplayable, right? That you just never want to put in your deck. And that doesn't seem to be the case back in the day, right?
I'd say most recently the set where you would struggle for playables the most would be Ixalan probably. But in general, I think that doesn't happen. And honestly, like, I just want to make clear, things used to be a certain way and things are a certain way now. And I mean, part of the reason for this is because the game is more fun now. Like, it's really not that fun to do a draft where only your first 8 picks matter, because then all the cards don't do anything. Right. And it's not that fun to watch people play with cards that don't do anything. And, I think a large part of the popularity, the popularity boom of Magic is because things are done this way. So obviously, if the goal was to simply make a game where John always won, like you could do that. But also that's just not that fun, right? Like when you draw cards off a deck, there's going to be some randomness. And also when you're trying to make this game as like a spectator sport and an esport, you got to have it be enjoyable for both the players and the spectators. So I think it's a very, very tough problem to solve, but I think they've been doing a really good job. I think they've come a long way.
Yeah, I do find that interesting because my instinct is, give me a tough problem to solve. And that's what's interesting to me. And that appeals more to that later style rather than the current one. Yet at the same time, I mean, I drafted Ravnica Allegiance yesterday. I probably will when we're done. Like I'm still drafting this set and it's been out for a long time and I haven't stopped drafting it. So, I don't know. They're doing something right. I know that much is for sure. And I think that you probably summed it up well when you said it's just more fun. Talk to us about being in the MPL, Huey. Is it sweet or do you feel weird being, kind of like now you're aligned with WotC in a different way than you were before? What do you feel about that? Does it feel weird to be kind of, so aligned with Wizards of the Coast? Does it feel great to be in the MPL? Like, what's your take on it?
Well, it does feel great to be in the MPL. As for like being aligned with Wizards of the Coast, I mean, before I was ever in the MPL, I had a tremendous amount of respect for Wizards and the people at Wizards, and I still do. I don't feel that I'm some company man or whatever now, just because when I tweet about my stream, I have to say it's sponsored. I think it just shows that, the strides that have been taken to make Magic a spectator sport and to make it such that I can finally really earn a living playing Magic and promoting Magic have come to fruition. So, it honestly, like sometimes people say things about the MPL players that maybe aren't the most flattering or whatever because of, they feel I don't know. I don't want to speak for anybody else, so I want to phrase this very carefully. But I, in my own personal opinion about myself, have definitely not compromised any of my own values in anything I've said or done. Like I don't say things I don't believe.
Yeah, and you shouldn't have to. I don't think that that's even an expectation either. I think that there's just a perception. And by the way, I mean, people have that about me as well, right? Because I work for Wizards in the booth and stuff like that. Even though I'm not an employee, I can say or do whatever I want technically, right? But also, people are smart. I mean, they know what's up. Like, I'm not an idiot, right? I like this job that I have with them, and I like to keep getting contracts with them and keep being able to earn money and help promote the thing that I love, which is competitive Magic. And so I'm not going to go on social media and just put them on blast about every little thing for no reason. If I have a legitimate gripe, I will say it. And I'm sorry, like I just will. Right. But I'm also like not a stupid person. Right. Like, I think that there's a balance to be struck there. And I think that I've seen that a little bit too from the MPL members as well, kind of going, okay, well, look, I don't want to put them on blast. I don't want to, be toxic or whatever. But at the same time, yeah, you have to still be yourself. And I don't think that there's even an expectation I've never heard them say, well, you can't talk about, anything that's not, you can't say your opinion or whatever. That doesn't seem to be a thing. So.
No, I don't feel that way. So
is it great then? I mean, like you've been wanting this forever, right?
Yeah. I mean, I'm really happy about it. It was on a personal level, even the fact that you had to ask that question makes me a little sad. Do you know what I mean?
I know. Yeah, I know exactly what you mean.
So that's sort of how I was trying to answer it. But, what I'm doing now is I'm trying to do the best I can to make the league and my own personal stuff as successful as I can. I'm trying to set a good example and just trying to do the right things. And hopefully, in 5, 10, 15, 20 years, somebody who started playing right now will be able to be in this position because of, the wheels that got in motion.
You're killing it, buddy. You're doing great. Your stream's really been doing well. We'll talk about that in a little bit. Let's rewind a couple of years here. For me personally, calling your name and calling your game and being on stage with you for your win at the World Championship was a real life and career highlight for me. And I don't know if you know this, but kind of funny. Somebody sent me a clip. They used a clip of that, of me calling your win at the World Championship on the NPR podcast Planet Money.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
really?
They used that clip. Somebody said, "Hey, you're on Planet Money." I'm like, "No, I'm not." They didn't talk to me. They're like, "No, they used a clip of you in that." And it was me calling your game, your win at the World Championship, which I thought was really cool. I remember vividly your preparation leading up to that World Championship. And I have never seen you as dialed in and as focused since I've known you, on a tournament. I mean, you were 100% committed to the preparation for that tournament. Can you talk to us a little bit about that? I mean, I remember talking to you and sometimes Owen, and you guys were delirious at times. You were testing so much.
Oh yeah. The tournament was in Boston. So I flew to Boston like a month early. I was going to stay at my father's house, or I did stay at my father's house rather. And I was just waking up, I wake up early. You know that about me. I was waking up at 6:37. I was going, doing my exercise for a couple hours, have some breakfast, come home. And then, 9:30, 10 o'clock, I would just start playing standard, and I would just play until I couldn't find anybody to play me anymore. And then I'd go to bed, or, unwind for an hour, then go to bed. Then I would just wake up the next day and do the same thing.
For how long?
About a month. Like at the time, incredible. My mindset was such that I had just won a Grand Prix in Kyoto,
mm-hmm.
and then I got top 64 at the Mythic Championship in Kyoto. And, 3 weeks before that, Owen Reed and I had won the Team Grand Prix in Cleveland.
Mm-hmm. That was
I sort of hadn't expected to,
mm-hmm.
yeah. And I sort of hadn't expected to make Worlds that year. And, at that point in 2017, I had no idea anything like the MPL was in the works or going to happen, or I'd be a part of it, or just anything, And so I thought to myself, buddy, you're getting old. This might be your last chance at the big one, so you better make it count. And so I just said, all right, well, I'm just going to give it 150% and then let the cards fall where they may. If it works out, it works out. And if it doesn't, what are you going to do? At least you tried.
Yeah. Well, you certainly tried, and they certainly did fall where they may. That was quite a win.
Yeah.
And seriously, man, that was just a real highlight. All right. I've got one more question before we move to our listener questions here. What ended up happening with the testing for the first Mythic Championship, for the limited testing for your team? Because you guys seem to be all drafting the same deck on day one somehow, yet also just crushing everybody with it. Like, I remember walking up after the draft was over, just outside the feature match area, and there was you and Rietzel, and eventually a singing, dancing, twirling Owen Turtenwald showed up, because you guys had like a remarkable record for your team, for the Ultimate Guard Pro team, in the limited portion of that first draft there. And in fact, for the second draft as well, we just didn't know it yet at the time. What in the world? Did you guys actually just break it?
I'm not sure. I will say, we did go, there are 6 of us. We went 16-2 in the draft on day one, which is pretty crazy. We were kind of joking with some of the guys who got unlucky in 103. You know what I mean? Like, oh, we had Ultimate Guard Pro team had fewer losses than whomever, individual. But
yeah, I know
don't know the individual
you're talking about now that I think about it.
No, there were a few of them. Yeah. I'm not singling anybody out, but it was whatever.
But that's incredible.
Yeah, it's a really good record.
18 matches, and you guys won 16 of them? Like,
yeah, that's damn good.
What the heck?
I'm not so sure that we broke the format. I do think, we're pretty consistent and limited. Like, I'll take our guys versus anyone,
mm-hmm. Yeah, you guys do really well limited.
Like, I think whoever happens to be our weakest limited player would probably be, at worst, third on any other team.
Mm-hmm.
And, another thing that we have is me, John, Paul, Andrew, we've been playing limited for 25 years. Like, we know how to figure out a limited format. You know what I mean?
Oh, I do.
These skills that we learned to apply in situations where we could only do 10 or 20 drafts. Now we get to apply when we do 100 drafts. And we also have, the two best players in the world on our team, who happen to be the younger players who are able to both take advice, formulate their own opinions, put the two together, and just way overachieve even us. So I just think the combination of all those things, I think it's going to be hard to come up with a group or a team that's going to be able to outperform just like our sort of combination of experience and young talent. You know what I mean?
Also diligence. I mean it. Like, remember, I got a chance to hang out with you guys before the team series final in Las Vegas, and I was there for, I guess it was about 11 hours total, something like 8 hours plus another couple of hours sessions after that. And, I was more or less a fly on the wall for those. I was doing it in the capacity as a coverage person. But my God, you guys are just machines, just getting through multiple team sealed deck builds in that time frame, sort of coming to conclusions, but not too quickly, gathering your information, sharing it in like a pretty concise way, and then moving on to the next thing, and really kind of all understanding that at this point it was about volume and about getting a bunch of reps in, and then sort of starting to make conclusions a little bit at the end. And just, it was weird because, I think that a lot of people think that a Pro Tour or a Mythic Championship testing team or an MPL team or something like that has a very specific vibe to it, which would be kind of, hard work and diligence and that kind of stuff. And if you go to most of them, that's not actually the case. It's a lot more relaxed. It's a lot more fun than that. In this particular setting, though, you guys were really focused in. And the cool part was that none of this stuff needed to be said. Like me sitting in that room, just listening in, poking my head in every once in a while, watching the matches, watching the builds and stuff. Nobody at any point said, hey, fellas, this is how we need to approach this. This is the way that we're going to do it, right? You guys just showed up and just did it. Well,
in fairness, I mean, I appreciate the compliment, but in fairness, we knew here were the rules we were going to have to play by. Mm-hmm. You're going to get your product at, I forget the time now, but let's just arbitrarily say 10 a.m. Yeah. And you're going to be able to use that product till 7 a.m. And we spent plenty of time at home saying, okay, we have 9 hours. How can we be most efficient in those 9 hours? Totally. And we planned how we're going to spend our time. I mean, not minute by minute, but we decided okay, we think that spending a ton of time on build at the beginning is not going to be that efficient. What we want to do is just build decks and play and learn the cards, because, these are the first time we get to play with these cards, right? Yeah. So we formulated our initial opinions. We went in, we built decks, and we just started playing them, because we were of the opinion that we were going to do better evaluating cards by getting to play them in game than to spend 2 hours per build and only get to do 2. We'd rather spend 20 minutes per build and get to do 6. Right. So it's true that once we got there, we all knew what we were going to do, but we did talk about it ahead of time, and we knew what we were going to do because we decided as a group. Yeah. It was really impressive to watch, man. It really was. Just you guys were very, very precise, and there were very few distractions. That was so fun. I mean, that was one of the most fun, when it's all said and done, and I think back on experiences I had playing Magic in my career, that's going to be towards the top. That was really, really fun. Yeah, it was exciting. It was interesting for me too, because, we had one coverage person with you guys, that was me. And then we put Tim Willoughby with your competitors, which was the How Rule You Latin team. And it was interesting because I happen to know all you guys, on the Ultimate Guard Pro team a lot better anyway, just probably because of proximity and whatever. But it was weird getting a chance to watch the games actually play out after having sat there for that time. I just felt more invested in the process of it. Like I was like, I know what they're going for. I know how they think, where normally I have to sort of try to reverse engineer that while I'm in the booth. And that doesn't leave me a lot of wiggle room. I have to maybe make a guess here or there, but I'm not willing to make huge assumptions or whatever. So it was really, really fun to watch that. And by the way, congratulations. You guys did win. Thank you. All right, let's get some questions from our listeners here, our patrons. This one comes from Jonathan, who says, I enjoyed the relaxed, humorous, experimental vibe you two brought to GPLA coverage. I also really enjoyed the Reed Duke experience at GP Richmond. If you were appointed coverage czar for Magic, what's another coverage experiment you would run? Ooh, this is a good question, Jonathan.
What do you think, Huey? What would you, if I said, you know what, Huey, you're in charge of, the next 5 GPs or the next 5 events or whatever, what kind of stuff would you want to see? I love doing the Reed Duke thing. I would do that more often myself.
Yeah, that sounded cool. Or it was cool. I mean, I watched it. I liked it a lot. Maybe because, I don't know. Yeah, maybe I'm biased.
Slightly biased, yeah.
I wonder if there'd be a way where you could do an experiment like that, but the player covered their own matches. I know Reed did it a little bit, but do you think you could do it in real time, or do you think it's impossible?
No, you could. You could do it. You would be on a delay, like it wouldn't be literally live. But as long as the person agreed not to tweet their stuff, it would be half an hour behind or whatever.
But I mean, do you think I could just sit down in a match against you per se and just talk while I played, or do you think I can't do it without giving anything away?
Oh no, you couldn't do that. I don't think.
Yeah. I wonder if there'd be any way we could figure out where.
Yeah, I mean, you could do it with both players, right? That is a way to do it.
Yeah, sort of. It doesn't really work in practice because there's like this weird prisoner's dilemma situation where like.
That's exactly right.
Yeah. So, good question. I haven't thought a ton about what I would do as coverage czar, but I definitely enjoyed what we did in LA.
Yeah. What did you think about that? By the way, for people that didn't see it, we were told at the beginning that Channel Fireball, who was running the coverage for the event, Andy, he wanted to do a much more. He wanted to try kind of an experiment. He really wanted to try to push the boundaries a bit, and he asked Huey and I, and also Riley and Luis, to really kind of let go and have more fun. Like he said, he really wanted a different vibe, and I said, dude, I'll give you what you're paying me, so I'll give you what you want. But are you sure you want this? And he said, yeah. And I just said, all right, Huey. Well, Huey and I. We're friends, we're close friends outside of this stuff. And we joke around all the time and we have our inside jokes and our stupid nonsense. And I just looked at Huey and I'm like, well, let's just do us. Like this.
Yeah. We just hung out.
Yeah. It's just like, this is how we would do it anyway. And I'm like, I don't know if this is going to fly because a lot of it's going to be weird to the listeners who are like, I don't get it or what's going on or whatever. But yeah, they really liked it. They liked it.
Yeah. The reception was great. Yeah. I mean, and it was really fun.
It really was.
Another thing specifically Andy told us was like interact with chat, which I found really fun.
Mm-hmm. Totally. Yeah. We brought them into everything. Like, in fact, we made fun of them. We did content. I mean, we had,
especially Beckstrom.
poor BK. Next question comes from Mark, who says, hi, Huey. In what ways would you say the game and the pro scene has improved from when you first started playing on the Pro Tour? What, if anything, do you wish you could have brought back? The Mythic Invitational, the Master Series, perhaps? Also, wanted to thank you for speaking with me and my husband at PT Dominaria. You're an inspiration to LGBT players everywhere, and it meant a lot to tell you that in person.
Well, thank you very much for the compliment. I actually remember that conversation, so I really appreciate it. I'll tell you one thing that I think is the biggest difference between back then and now is it's a much older crowd now. Mm-hmm. Not like everybody's my age, but when I was playing back then, like, I started playing the Pro Tour and I was like 16, and that was just normal to see. There were a lot of people my age and a lot of people in their early 20s, but you know what happens when you put a lot of 16-year-old boys together? And that's what it was at the time. I'm not saying there couldn't have been girls, there just weren't. You know what I mean? Yep. And when you put a lot of 16-year-old boys together, they just act like little brats.
Yeah, they do. It's bad.
And so, like, from my perspective, there were a lot more just nonsense bickering, people doing things they shouldn't have, and just, you know what I mean? Just kids being kids in some respects, but you don't really get that anymore.
Are you glad it's gone? Or?
Yeah.
Okay.
Frankly, I wish I could go back and take back a couple things even. But that's how it is, right? That's growing up. Yep. But nowadays, I find that, especially in the pro scene, everybody's a bit older and more mature. And I think that makes the experience much better for fans and players alike. I don't think people were particularly friendly to their opponents, at least compared to how they are now. And I don't think anybody, pros or otherwise, was all that concerned about the experience of their opponents.
Right.
So those things I'm glad have improved. And I think that's the nature of the scene and the people in the scene maturing over time. As for what I could get back, I didn't hate all limited Pro Tours. But don't get me wrong, I don't think they're coming back.
Yeah, agreed. Another question from Jonathan says, you have both achieved a lot of success in Magic, and Magic itself seems more successful and full of hope than ever. But what do you think about the future of Magic or your role in that future? And what do you fear most?
What do I fear most?
We talk about this a lot, you and I, Huey, off air. This is a thing that, looking at it from a kind of a career or a bigger picture perspective, both Huey and I are older, and, the decisions that we make with regards to our career right now have a bigger impact on us going forward, because we're eating up, valuable years of our working life that we're not going to get back. Where if you're like 21 and you take a shot at a career and it doesn't work out, and you wake up and you're 27 and you're like, well, that didn't really work, I'll do something else. You still have a lot of runway to kind of build something new. And so, there's definitely a risk, Jonathan, with what we're doing, because if for some reason Magic started to be terrible, or they took the wrong turn, or the game flopped for some reason or whatever, we're kind of all in on this thing. Now, I have a lot of faith that that's not going to happen, or else I wouldn't be sitting here doing this podcast and talking to Huey and talking to all of you. But at the same time, these are legitimate concerns, right? Because most careers don't rely on one company, right? Most of the time, like if I decide I'm going to be an engineer, I can go work for a company. And yeah, if that company goes down, then I'm going to be in a bad spot. But there's a lot of other companies, that can hire engineers. With this, it's kind of like I'm all in on Wizards of the Coast. And I agree with Huey with what he said, which is that that's a lot of hardworking, smart, dedicated people who are really genuinely trying to get it right. And sometimes they don't. And that sucks. But for the most part, if you look at the big picture, they tend to do very well. And the game tends to do very well. So it is a really interesting question, Jonathan, that you bring up. What are the things that I fear most? I mean, for me, I just fear that the game goes in a direction that I don't like. Because the thing is, like, in order to do a podcast every week, in order to show up and go in the booth and stuff as often as I do, I have to actually, genuinely be behind it in my head. Like, I have to actually really think about it and think, this is a game that's worth sharing. This is a community that's worth, loving and nurturing and that kind of stuff. And I think that the fear I have is that one day I'll wake up and not feel that way, because then I don't know what I'm going to do, because I would probably keep doing my stuff for some period of time, but I can't do it forever. Like, my heart has to be in it, to keep doing it. So that's a thing that I think about, but also it's been like 10, 11 years and that hasn't happened. So probably won't.
Yeah, I sort of agree. I mean, I think at this point in my life, I expect I'll be working in Magic for a long time. I'm hoping to be in the MPL for a long time, but we'll see what happens. I think that I've been involved in the community for so long, and I've done so much stuff both on the playing side and the business side that I'll be able to find stuff to do. I think I'll be able to provide value in the long term, whether it's, who knows what could happen, right? Like whether it's a commentator or a manager or an employee of a team or a coach or whatever. I'm confident that I'll be able to make my way in the Magic world. So, but I'm hoping I'm going to be a player and a content creator for a while. So I have no sort of longer term plans than that right now. Yeah.
See, I think if I were in your seat, my first goal would be to commit fully to the MPL stuff and then see where that lands in 3 to 4 years. James says, the closeness and longevity of the Peach Garden Oath, the PGO, has always intrigued me. Beyond the camaraderie of hanging out with friends and functional benefits of practicing with other elite players, what do Reed and Owen each individually bring to the PGO that is unique and helps you improve as a player?
Okay, this is a good question. I've answered this question sort of in different ways before. And there's one thing I've always said that I think is very important to note. You see these teams form, right, over the years. And it doesn't matter who's who, but, there'll be a tournament in California or Massachusetts or Florida or Texas or whatever. And teams will show up and you'll go, wow, like this team is a really good team. It's like 3 of the best players. Do you know what I mean?
Yep, totally.
I'm not talking about us. And then the next week it'll be like 1 player from that team with 2 players from a different team. Yep. And then the next week it's like whatever, everybody's just kind of moving around and playing with who they want. Owen Reed and I started playing together right when I came back to Magic, and Reed had basically like no success at the Pro Tour level.
Yep.
I don't even think he had made his first Pro Tour top 8 yet. In fact, I'm sure he hadn't. Owen had either just made a Pro Tour top 8 at Gate Crash, or I think not quite yet. I don't remember exactly where our timeline had fallen in, where it fell in the timeline. I know I was hanging out with Owen when he made his first top 8, or at least we were friends. Whether or not, whatever. I wasn't in the Hall of Fame yet. You know what I mean?
Yep.
And I sort of had come back, and I was looking to reprove myself and try to get into that. And these kids, I feel more comfortable calling them kids at the time. I can't believe it's been like 6 years now.
Yeah, now they're pushing 30, buddy.
Yeah. But these kids, I went to this Pro Tour testing team at Pro Tour Tour in Ravnica, and they just had a passion for the game. You know what I mean?
Oh, yeah.
Owen wanted to win so bad. And there was something about Reed. He just, I just remember he treated me with so much respect. Like, I was still sort of used to the old days where nobody respected anybody within reason. And like, he would just ask me questions like that. He just cared so much about the game and the history of the game. What was the best deck you ever played? Who was the toughest opponent you ever faced? And when we first started playing together, I thought probably I was in a position where I was, playing with these two guys who were pretty good. And, maybe I didn't realize, obviously, we would have such a long-term 3-man team with one of the most successful, Grand Prix resumes in history and whatever. But we played our first tournament, was an SCG Open, and we won it. And I was like, okay, these kids are something special. But the thing I've said before, and I think I think this is a very important point, and I believe this is 100% the truth. And I'm not trying to be overly arrogant here, but I, in earnest, don't believe that at any point Reed, Owen, and I formed a team because we were the 3 best players. I think 100% certainty we're the 3 best players because we formed a team.
Mm-hmm.
And we had like-minded goals. We were all very driven. We all wanted to win, and we wanted to work together to do that. And at all times when necessary, people were willing to take one for the team. You know what I mean?
Yep.
In various ways. Like, I know what my strengths are on the team, and I know I do a lot of the delegation for the 3 of us. I sort of know what I feel are people's strengths and weaknesses, and I know how to treat Reed, and I know how to treat Owen, and it's not exactly the same all the time to get the same result. Do you know what I mean?
Oh, absolutely. Especially with those guys. They're such different people.
Right. And I think that's part of being, I guess I would consider myself sort of the unofficial leader of the team. And
they would say that too.
Right. And I think that we just developed such an tremendous chemistry and respect and just love for each other that there was just no way we weren't going to succeed.
Yeah, it's incredible seeing what you guys have done, especially given the range of time that you've done it. You mentioned that you'll see teams pop up, these sort of mini super teams, but they never stay together, ever. You're always like, wow, that's the next big thing. And then in 2 years, they don't like each other. They don't play with each other anymore. They're on completely separate things. They've changed sponsors. All these sort of whirlwind of things around have taken over, and they're just not playing together anymore.
Yeah, people kind of teased us about the whole PGO thing at the beginning, but nobody teases us anymore.
I bet they don't. It's great. David says, "Hey guys, last time I got a question through. I asked if you were playing any other games than Magic. Since I already got an answer to that from Marshall and Luis, I'd love to know if Huey plays anything else or lives on a purely Magic-based gaming diet. If anything has changed for you, Marshall, I, of course, listened to that, but I don't expect any changes. Greetings from Vienna." You are correct, David. Nothing has changed for you. What about Huey? Do you play other games besides Magic? Are you a gamer?
I do like games, but I don't have time right now. It's all Magic all the time. I'm not complaining. I like Magic the best. Over the years, I've gotten into World of Warcraft here and there for a while. I'm pretty good at Guitar Hero.
I've seen you play that, right?
Yeah, I think so. I like to play that, but really all I do right now is play Magic and do Magic-related things.
I like playing Guitar Hero, too. We should play sometimes, Huey.
Yeah, let's do it.
I'm not that good, though, but I do like it. Remy says, "Hey, Guy, what is your most played and least played good card from Ravnica Allegiance?" What does that mean? Your most played good card?
My most played good card's probably Dovin's Acuity.
Oh, there you go.
most of the times I draft on Arena, I just force the Dovin's Acuity deck because I find it so fun.
By the way, that card that person made was really funny.
Oh, it was awesome. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then I suspect my least played good card is Ill-Gotten Inheritance, just because I think I value it less than most people, so I don't get it as much.
Yeah, that's funny. We've talked about that quite a bit on the show as well, about where it fits and where it doesn't. Right. Jamie says, what are your favorite draft formats and why? Also, I've heard IPA draft was great, but the few times I've drafted it online, it seemed mostly be about changing your opponent's land types. What am I missing? What is IPA again?
Invasion, Plane Shift, Apocalypse.
Right. I think
it was a really fun format, except like it turned out like the best first picks were very often just mana fixing. Like Harrow was often the best first pick, or like Primal Growth types cards, just because the commons and even were so powerful that you wanted to be able to play all your best cards. So if your first pack didn't have like a bomb, you're often just taking mana fixing. People love the format because you could draft wonky decks, but it's all going to be semantic here of how you define best, right?
Mm-hmm. Is this the format with Jilt in it?
Yeah.
Oh, I did draft this a few times with the Seattle draft grinders. I found it very difficult to dive into it at first blush. I was like, what is going on here?
Yeah. I mean, like the commons, I mean, I know that your viewers are probably a bit new school, but like my guess is the best 12 commons in Invasion are probably better than the best common in RNA, for example.
Holy smokes. Are you serious?
That's my rough estimate.
Wow.
But I could be slightly overestimating it.
Wow, that's incredible.
And, you know, like in the second pack, Flame Tongue Kavu was effectively like Ravenous Chupacabra. That was an uncommon. Magma Burst was like a ridiculous common. Terminate was a common.
Yeah, we don't get cards like that anymore.
No, they're not going to print Terminate. That's the thing. Also, when you have cards like Terminate at common, sometimes you just get a deck with 3 Terminates. You know what I mean? Like
incredible.
Yeah.
Now they're uncommon, and that's fine. That seems to be a little bit.
Yeah, I don't know, but even like 2 mana kill any creature, I think is rare now.
Yeah. Oh, very rare. Yeah. You mean actual rare? Yeah.
I mean, I think the rarity would be rare if they were to print it.
Yeah, I think you're right.
Like Hero's Downfall or Bedevil or something.
Yeah. Craig says, what brought you back to the game after taking some years off?
So I had missed Hall of Fame by 1 vote, and they gave me a special invitation to Pro Tour Return to Ravnica, excuse me. And so I went and I hung out with a lot of old friends and made a lot of new friends, and I didn't want to leave, so I stayed.
I'm glad you stayed, Huey.
Thank you.
Eater says, hello, Huey and Marshall. My name is Eater. I'm a longtime listener from Brazil. After years of practice and study of the limited environment, I'm always trying to follow the limited masters' evaluations of the cards, mixing with my own. That's, by the way, the perfect way to do that. So when it comes to borderline build around playables, I always have a hard time knowing when I should put them in or not. Some examples. When should I play Wilderness Reclamation? 4 Goblin Gathering and 4 other 1-power creatures is enough for Cavalcade of Calamity? Or Kaladesh's Start Your Engines in a 5 vehicle deck with 2 rares? How do I know when I can deviate from the common sense and play these kind of cards? Thanks, and Team Shelley forever. Nice. This is always a really difficult thing to find, right? We'll talk about this in the set reviews, Huey, where Luis and I will kind of come up with a number, right? Like we'll say something like, oh, here's this card that cares about how many multicolor cards you have. Well, how many do you need to play to make this playable, right? And we'll talk about the minimum number. A good one for this, by the way, is a card like Dovin's Acuity, right? When I first saw it, I thought, well, how many do I need to make this card really good? And my answer was like 6, something like that. As it turns out, I've actually played it with fewer than that. I've played it with like 4 and some Clear the Minds and, some ways to kind of get it going, because I realized at some point later that I didn't necessarily need to make Dovin's Acuity this all-in game plan. I could just get a little bit of value out of it and still be pretty happy. But that's different for each of these build-around cards. So how do you even begin to approach, where you get that initial starting point or where that final starting point ends up?
So I think this is a good question. And part of the reason it's a good question is because I think it's the hardest thing to teach about Magic. Mm-hmm. As much as you listen to me or Marshall and Luis talk about this card is this good and this card is this good, the difference between limited and constructed is everything is on a scale, right? Like you can have a deck where occasionally you're just not going to take a bomb rare in your color in lieu of a pretty good uncommon because of some interaction or some strategy of your deck. And I think the problem is I'm never going to be able to give an answer to like how many multicolored cards do you need to play this card in your deck? It just doesn't really work that way.
Right.
Like there's just a sliding scale, right? Like, okay, if you have 2, it's just okay. Sometimes you want a just okay card in your deck, or sometimes you're accomplishing a different goal. If you have 14, obviously you're going to play it. If you have 6, maybe you're going to play it. Like, how good is it at a 6 in this specific deck based on your other cards? Like, to give you an example, I've never put Wilderness Reclamation in a limited deck.
Right.
But I don't think it's impossible, right? Like, if I had, I don't know, 12 Adapt creatures and 5 Frilled Mystics, maybe I'd put it in my deck. Or I shouldn't say that. I would definitely put it in my deck. If I had 4 Adapt creatures and 2 Frilled Mystics, would I put it in my deck? I don't know. Maybe if I had a precognitive perception, I would. There's a lot more context to these things. And it's just so nuanced that it's so hard. This is where you gain from experience, in my opinion.
Right. Yeah.
This is where you're able to pinpoint, the boundaries on the scale. Like where somebody else might go like, wow, I can't tell if this card is between a 4 and an 8 in the way this deck is. I think I may be able to narrow it down slightly better. Something between like a 5 and a 6.5. You know what I mean?
Yep.
And I think that's where the edge in limited comes, in doing things that are outside the ordinary and not simply just memorizing pick orders and going like, oh, well, Luis said this card's better than this card, so I should just take this card.
Yeah.
There's a lot more nuance to it. I think, Reed once said something, and it wasn't about this specifically, but, you could say there's science here, but I think on some level, drafting a deck and building a limited deck is maybe more art than science.
Yeah, that's a really good way to put it. And that's something that we struggle with on the podcast all the time, is to try to get that through to people, because we want to get them usable takeaways, right? We want them to show up at their shop after having listened to the show, or fire up their next draft online after having listened to the show, and have something to work on or to try out or to feel more comfortable with. But at the same time, we don't want to lie, right? We don't want to say like, oh, we have all the answers and you're going to come here and get them. And, we've seen the articles and the shows and all this stuff with these, where they're trying to use statistics that are often flawed, or at the very least, from a very, very small sample, a non-relevant sample, but it makes you feel better, right? It makes you feel like, oh, well, now I know these numbers and I'm going to do this thing. But it's like oftentimes the case that you would diverge from that decision based on other factors that you can't really bake into something like that. And that's just, it's more art. I like the way you put that.
Also, for what it's worth, if you think somebody's wrong, and this is a viewer, like if you want to try something, just try it. And if it works for you, it works for you. Like just because Luis says a card is bad, or Marshall said a card is bad, or maybe I say a card is bad, it doesn't mean it's always bad, and there's no situation where it can ever be good.
Yeah, that's a good.
Nobody, when they say this card is a borderline playable, means it's always borderline playable. I've had decks in my career where cards that everybody thought were not really playable were very good cards because, I drafted a deck that used that card in a specific way. And that's possible to do. So if you think you found something like that, don't just dismiss it because somebody else's opinion is, without understanding the context and the nuance of what your deck is or what you're doing.
Yeah. Yeah. Good example too with that Wilderness Reclamation, because I'm in the same camp there. James says, hey, Huey, knowing the little we know about War of the Spark, including that each draft will feature at least 24 Planeswalkers, what is one prediction you have for how the format will be balanced to avoid limited matches becoming a race to see who can get a Planeswalker into play first?
Well, I would imagine either the Planeswalkers won't be – some of them would have to be pretty weak, right?
Yeah. Uncommon ones or something.
Well, that I don't know. But, you can't just have Elspeth Sun's Champion in every pack, right?
Yeah.
You can't. This pack has a Chandra. This pack has a Jace. Jace the Mind Sculptor, Chandra Torture Defiance, Elspeth Sun's Champion, Liliana Vess. Because then it would be like that. I also suspect we'll see a greater than average number of cards that interact with Planeswalkers.
Okay, yeah, that's what we're thinking too.
You would have to, right?
Yeah.
But also, I don't think the packs are all just going to have Tybalt either. So
yeah, because that wouldn't be fun and people would not.
Right. I'm really curious to see what happens. a planeswalker in every pack. Like, also, are they going to be so good that your draft is already decided? Like, do you just have to take your planeswalker and move on? I wonder.
Yeah, I see. That's the part that scares me. I don't like formats like that where I take the first pick and it's sort of pre-decided for me, especially if there's gold ones where it's just like, well, here's your 2 colors, or hopefully you can splash this thing.
Yeah. And I mean, is it minimum 1 per pack? I mean, it's crazy to ask, but is it just straight 1 per pack or minimum 1 per pack?
Well, they've said that there's 1 in every pack. I don't know.
So probably
I don't know
exactly
if that
1.
Precludes putting an extra.
I sort of wonder if it's like, what's the name of the set with the squiggly legends? The recent set where like
the what?
the legends where they had the squiggly borders, where you got a legend in every pack.
Oh yeah, from Dominaria.
Dominaria, yeah.
Like squiggly legend.
Like maybe it's like that, right? Where you can have an uncommon, rare, or mythic, but you're going to get 1 planeswalker. So maybe some of the common planeswalkers won't do that much, +1 gain a life, -1 gain 2 life, or whatever.
Sure.
Like,
yeah. And that would actually be pretty exciting. I really like that. That'd be a different dynamic. Although I do wonder if they'd end up looking too much like, what are those things called from that same set? Sagas.
Maybe.
But, yeah.
But I sort of could envision it going that way, though I don't know.
This one's also from James. Says, in terms of creating a great limited environment, what is the one mechanic from throughout Magic's history you'd like to see brought back in an upcoming set in the near future?
I think for my own personal enjoyment of a limited format, the best mechanic is cycling.
Mm-hmm.
I think cycling has this inherent ability to create non-games, especially when you have cycle, or to reduce the number of non-games is what I mean to say. Mm-hmm. Especially when you have lands that cycle and cards that cycle, because if you have not enough lands, you can cycle to find lands. If you have too many lands, you can cycle to find spells, and I find that to be enjoyable. Yeah. I think non-games are not fun. Like I thought Hour of Devastation was really fun with all the cycling lands and cycling cards and, cycling the deserts, like deserts in the graveyard matter cards and that stuff. I found that format to be really fun.
Yeah, it was really good. Matt says, Luis is taking this week off from LR to prepare for the Mythic Invitational. So how are you here?
You can just say you're care about Marshall more, I guess.
Yeah, there it is. You're a much harder worker than Luis. Luis actually had a lot going on besides the prep for the Mythic Invitational. That was but one of the things he had to do this week. Jurn says, any tips on how to stay calm and focused during an important tournament like the World Championship? Do you have any other advice lessons that you learned from Worlds in 2017?
Well, honestly, probably would have been hard for me if it was one of my first few, but, when it's your 55th one, you kind of just learn to stay calm over time.
Yeah. You just get used to it, right? I mean,
right. Like I definitely wasn't calm at my first one or my 5th one or my 8th one. I don't know where the line was, but I was definitely calm at my 40th,
Yeah. And boy, that helped out because you had some intense stuff down the stretch.
Yeah.
That was a really stressful finals, to say the least. This person's name is Andy. What's your life total Bentley? Got to be a red player, I guess.
Probably.
Cards in hand. How many hours roughly do you take to prepare for a tournament? What format have you drafted and enjoyed the most, and why? How many hours?
I guess it varies from tournament to tournament. For a Grand Prix, not that many, maybe 10. Mm-hmm. Like I oftentimes just go for fun almost. Mm-hmm. And for a Pro Tour Mythic Championship, 150, 200 maybe.
So a month?
Yeah. Well, I was thinking the last 2 weeks, probably 60 hours a week.
Yeah. Okay.
And then before that, probably like 30, 40.
Yeah. Chris says, hello, Marshall and Huey. Huey, when it's all said and done and you look back on your career, would you rather be known for being the outstanding player and competitor that you are, or one of the greatest sources of inspiration and representation for the LGBTQ community in Magic?
The latter, and it's not even close.
Yeah. I know how much.
What's that?
I said I know how much that means to you.
Yeah, I honestly, one thing I regret about my own life and my career is that I didn't take all those steps to, come out and talk about my own personal struggles and stuff sooner. So, I'm confident if I never won another match of Magic that I'll I'm happy with everything I've accomplished, and I'm proud of what I accomplished. So if in the other area, if I get to be around for a few more years and actually, provide positive representation for people and help people at all, then I'll definitely have just succeeded in life, I think.
Yeah, man, I was so proud of you.
Thanks, bud.
No joke about it. David says, what was the motivation for you, Owen, and Reed to form the Peach Garden Oath in the first place?
Well, mostly like I talked about before, we just sort of all had like-minded goals. I mean, even though I had already done it once, I came back and I was like I had a long break and I was looking to prove that I could still hang with this modern crowd of Magic. And, Owen and Reed were both trying to make a name for themselves. And so a lot of the people who I had been friends with from my first go round, they played Magic, but they didn't play full time and they weren't considering themselves professionals. And so I needed and wanted a group that I could regularly communicate with, feed ideas off of, and try to improve together. And I guess as it turned out, they were looking for the same thing. So it was fortunate that we got connected when we did and that we all worked very well together.
Was there a time, did it just happen? Like, was it just like, you guys did well at that SCG and then you were like, all right, well, let's play in the next one and let's just keep playing in the next one. And then it just kind of became a thing where like we play together? Or did you ever stop and actually say, hey guys, this is really working out well. I think we should solidify this, and say we're a team now, that is going to be the same team going. Like, did you ever get a commitment from each other about stuff, or did it?
I don't know if we ever went like, okay, we're just going to play all tournaments together, except that it's I know what you're asking. Mm-hmm. I don't know. Like, I know we started calling ourselves the Peach Garden Oath. We took a vow of brothership, mm-hmm. and we swore to uphold the realm and build team sealed decks. But I don't know at what point it was like, okay, we're just not going to worry about who we're ever going to play with.
Yeah.
At times, Reed would almost joke. He would say like, I'd be like, oh, there's a team Grand Prix in Memphis in 5 weeks. And Reed would be like, oh, do you want to be on a team? We already knew we were going to go. And so I don't know when exactly it went from like, we played a few tournaments together to we're just going to play tournaments together. And
yeah,
I don't think it was ever like formalized in the way you're asking.
Andrew says, do you think land removal will ever have a spot in Limited?
I don't think so. I think it's just not a good experience for the person playing against a land destruction deck. And so I think those cards are intentionally made extra weak so they're not even accidentally playable.
What if they were cheaper? What if it costs like 1 mana or something stupid?
Like Sinkhole?
Yeah.
Yeah, they'd be good, but then it's not fun for your opponent to just play 3 land destruction spells and then just play a 6/6 while you have no lands. It's just not a good experience. And I don't think that's the experience people are, R&D is looking to provide their consumers.
Yeah. All right. A couple more questions for Huey. This one comes from Ryan. It says, Dear Marshall and Huey, firstly, thank you to Marshall for helping me develop into a much stronger Magic player than I was when I first listened to the Dragon's Maze set review. You're welcome, Ryan. My question for Huey is, as MTG's resident dabbing expert, what drove you into the role of educator of youth culture among your contemporaries?
Good question. I think it was
you
Twitch
are my
chat.
dab sensei.
I think it was Twitch chat.
Yeah, it was. It was raw peer pressure from Twitch chat that led both of us into what has now become a Twitch clip and a GIF. So yeah, we can never forget. Anthony says, greetings also from Las Vegas. So Anthony's from Las Vegas as well. My question for Huey, what is a major level up moment for you with regards to Limited? And Atipong also asked, what is your most recent level up moment in Limited? Atipong added, just curious if world-class players like you still experience those. Do you know what they mean by that?
I think I do, like almost like an epiphany, like, I should be doing this.
Where you're just like, dang, I get this thing now that I haven't been doing. Did that still, that can't happen to you anymore, right? Like,
well, I think it happens, maybe not, it might not happen to like, it might not happen in the sense that like, I suddenly understand a new concept, right? Mm-hmm. Like, I think I've got the concepts down, but surely like occasionally, like, a new set comes out, and the first time I draft the creatureless control deck, I go like, oh, wow, this is real. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Like, oh, this is something I might want to practice. Like, I might be able to pull this off at the tournament because nobody else is going to take these cards. This might be a free deck.
Right.
Things like that. But I don't think I'm all of a sudden like, wow, like,
yeah,
I should block more or whatever.
That's kind of the point of being a world-class expert, I guess, is that you've moved on from that stage. Matt says, what's it like living with Owen and Shahar? Do you play paper Magic much together, or does all the streaming mean that when the cameras are off, you're just hanging out?
Yeah, mostly the latter. Occasionally when we're practicing for a paper Magic tournament, we play a little bit. But the thing is, even now when we practice for paper Magic stuff, we often just play digitally anyway because it's more efficient.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have to build decks. You don't have to shuffle. And you can just play the games themselves faster. So when the cameras are off, we're mostly hanging out. I mean, I spend a lot of time with my dog. We try to go out to dinner, all the three of us, a couple times a week, to a couple places we really like.
Like Giuseppe's?
No, I haven't been there since I moved back, man. I'm waiting for you.
I know you're waiting for me. I'll go.
Yeah.
I'm down.
But yeah, I love those guys. I'm happy to have them around. I'm happy to be around them all the time. And living with them is great, to answer the broad question.
They're lucky to have you, buddy. Dana says, hello, LR. Huey, how do you manage your work-life balance? Do you have a partner, family, or your personal needs that often get sacrificed for Magic, or have you mastered the balance? Any tips are appreciated, and I'm a huge fan. That's from Dana.
Thank you very much, Dana. I'm actually really bad at this.
Yeah, we talk about this a lot.
What's that?
You and I talk about this a lot. It's really
I'm really actually not good at this. I spend not enough time on my own needs, I think. Between all my commitments and work, and I could probably just use a couple more hours of sleep every day. But yeah, I'm not the one to give you advice on work-life balance, I'm sorry to say.
Yeah, it is actually quite difficult when you're on your own. I think one of the underlying factors is the fact that you and I have both chosen work that it rewards you for putting in more time,
right?
And has no structure. And for people like you and I, that is a recipe for putting way too much time in it and never really separating from it.
Right, I agree. And so I guess to answer the rest of your question, I don't have a family in traditional sense, though I am close enough with some of my friends I would consider them family. And I'm not seeing anybody on a personal level.
All right. So we'll work on the balance thing, I guess, is the thing. All right, Huey, let's stop there. First things first, I want to say thank you for coming on the show. I've had you on the show another time, but it was for the special edition of LR, which has really kind of solidified itself as one of the most popular episodes we've done. And, that was because of what you gave us on that. So thanks for that. And thanks for coming on here. I want to give you a chance, though, to let people know where they can get more Huey, because you've been streaming a lot and it's going really well. Yeah. So I've been streaming weekdays. So Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday on twitch.tv/HueyWJ, HueyWJ. The WJ is my initials, William Jensen. I will be off, I think, when this show airs because I'll be at the Mythic Invitational. Mm-hmm. Though I'll be returning on Monday, April 1st. So the stream will be back Tuesday, April 2nd. And so you can catch me all that week, twitch.tv/HueyWJ. We do a lot of stuff on there. Recently, I've been playing a lot of Constructed. I know this is a limited focus crowd, but after the Mythic Invitational, I'll have hopefully some more time for Limited. So please come check out the show. I think you'll enjoy it. I try to have fun. Yeah. You've been having a nice time there. And I'll, of course, put a link in the show notes to Huey's stream as well. And what you can do is you can click on that link and it'll take you to his Twitch page. And then you can just click follow at the top. And by default, it'll notify you whenever Huey goes live. And that way you can catch up on his stream and learn from one of the best and have some good time singing songs and hanging out along the way as well. Huey, thanks again for coming on, man. We'll have you on again in the future, I'm sure. All right. Thanks a lot for having me, Marshall. Of course, I want to mention our sponsor, Channel Fireball. That's the place to go for all things Magic related on the internet, including selling your cards back to them. That's right. This is a big part of the Magic ecosystem is, Magic's expensive hobby. Let's keep it real here. It's not cheap to play Magic. And if you want to keep playing, you got to be efficient with the way that you manage your collection. And one way you can do this is you can take those draft rares that you've gotten, package them up, send them into Channel Fireball. And if you trade them in for store credit, you'll get a 30% bonus on that, which you can use for sealed product or whatever it is that you happen to need. And that's a great way to kind of keep the ball rolling on the Magic hobby, given that it is pretty expensive to do. You, of course, can just get cash as well if you happen to need that. Make sure you check that out at channelfireball.com. You can find me on social media, Marshall_LR. And as I mentioned before, I'll have a link to Huey's Twitch and Twitter in the show notes for this episode. You can find all things related to the podcast at lrcast.com. That's going to do it for this one. We'll see you next week.